Billionaire Alpha King offered Omega a deal of fate. Refusal was never an option. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Emily Harrison had always felt like an outsider, a quiet Omega in a world that demanded strength. She spent most of her life being overlooked and dismissed. But there was something about her, a quiet strength, an inner resilience, that even she didn't fully understand. Born into a family that struggled to make ends meet, Emily had never been the shining star. Her scent never developed like the other Omega women, making her all the more invisible in a society that relied heavily on the scent bonds between mates. No alpha had ever come for her. No one had ever sought her out. She was nothing more than a whisper in the wind, a forgotten presence in a world where power was everything. It was at the Moonspire Temple, the grandest place for the Omega ceremony, that Emily found herself again kneeling in silence. The ceremony had ended hours ago, but no alpha had claimed her. The other Omegas had been chosen, marked, and taken away, leaving her to wonder if she was destined to be alone forever. Her heart heavy with disappointment, she could hear the whispers of the others in the temple. Broken Omega, they muttered. Defective. It was a harsh truth she had long since accepted. She wasn't special, and she wasn't wanted. Just as she was about to give in to the darkness creeping around her thoughts, a deep, commanding voice cut through the silence. Miss Harrison, the man said, stepping out of the shadows. His presence alone seemed to command the room, his aura radiating power. Emily looked up, startled, meeting the eyes of a stranger whose gaze was intense, calculating. He was tall, his posture regal despite his unremarkable clothing. But there was something about the way he carried himself. He was different. The man's silver-gray eyes held her captive, not in the way an alpha would claim, but in the way a ruler might survey his land. I've heard of you, Emily, he continued, his voice smooth but firm. The world sees you as weak, as nothing more than an Omega who can't even produce a scent. But I see potential, a potential that I believe can change everything. Emily's heart raced. What was he talking about? Who was this man? And why was he speaking to her like this? She had never been the center of attention before, let alone for something good. I am Alexander Blackwood, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, he revealed, his voice carrying a weight that left her breathless. The moment those words left his lips, something inside Emily shifted. She had heard the rumors, of course, every Omega had. The infamous Alpha King, ruthless, powerful, and cold as ice. He was a force of nature, a ruler who had conquered and claimed everything in his path. I've come to offer you a deal, Emily, Alexander continued, his eyes never leaving hers. A deal of fate. A deal that will change your life forever. Refusal was never an option for you. Emily blinked, processing his words. Refusal? What did he mean by that? And why was he offering her, of all people, a deal? She was nothing, just a rejected Omega in a world where only the strongest thrived. Alexander took a step closer, his presence now overwhelming, the air around them thick with unspoken tension. I offer you a chance to rise above your limitations, he said, his voice low but unwavering. I'll give you a purpose. I'll give you power, protection, and a future where you are no longer invisible. All I ask in return is that you trust me. Emily's mind raced as she tried to make sense of what he was saying. Her heart pounded in her chest, unsure of whether to accept or refuse. But one thing was certain. She couldn't stay in this place forever, forgotten and alone. Maybe this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. Maybe, just maybe, fate had a different plan for her than she had ever imagined. Emily stood there, her heart racing, her mind spinning with the words that had just been spoken. Alexander Blackwood, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, was offering her a deal that seemed too good to be true. She had always been invisible in the eyes of the world, an Omega with no scent, no purpose, just a quiet shadow in a world where power and strength reigned supreme. And yet, here he was, the most powerful man in the land, standing before her, offering her something no one ever had. "What do you want from me?" she finally asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Alexander's silver-gray eyes met hers, his gaze intense but not unkind. "What I want," he began, his voice low and calm, "is for you to accept what you are capable of. You've been living your life in the shadows, but I see something in you, Emily. Something rare, something that could change everything." His words were like a spark, igniting something deep within her. She had never seen herself as special, just an omega, weak and dismissed. But Alexander was telling her that there was more to her than she had ever imagined. She didn't know whether to feel terrified or hopeful, but she knew she couldn't walk away from this. She had spent so many years yearning for a chance, for someone to see her for who she truly was. Could this be it? Could he be offering her that chance? "And what exactly does this deal entail?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady, even though her heart was pounding in her chest. Alexander took a step closer, closing the distance between them. She could feel the weight of his presence, the power radiating from him. "I am offering you a life that you've never dreamed of, Emily," he said softly, his tone filled with sincerity. "A life where you are more than just an omega. You will be by my side, a queen in your own right, with all the privileges and protection that come with it. All I ask is that you trust me." Emily's breath caught in her throat. A queen? Her? It seemed impossible, but as she looked into his eyes, she saw no deception, no trickery. He was serious, and for the first time in her life, someone was offering her a future. The weight of his offer hung in the air between them, and Emily felt a mixture of excitement and fear. This was a chance, a real chance to change her life, to escape the life she had always known. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite place. She had spent so long being alone, being unnoticed, that now, with this offer, it felt like her entire world was shifting. Could she really trust him? Could she really trust anyone, especially someone as powerful as Alexander Blackwood? "I don't know if I can trust you," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can trust anyone." Alexander stepped forward, his hand reaching out to gently touch her shoulder, his touch surprisingly warm. "I understand your hesitation," he said, his voice filled with understanding. "But sometimes, Emily, we have to take a leap of faith. This is your chance to change everything, to be someone more than just an invisible omega. The choice is yours, but I'm telling you now, refusal was never an option for you." His words struck her like a bolt of lightning. Refusal was never an option. She had always been the one to fade into the background, to let life pass her by. But now, she had the chance to step forward, to take control of her own destiny. Could she do it? Could she accept his offer, even if it meant stepping into a world she didn't fully understand? She met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. I'll do it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'll accept your offer. I don't know what this means, but I'll trust you." Alexander's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of warmth in his eyes. "You won't regret it, Emily," he said, his voice filled with promise. "I'll protect you, and I'll help you realize your full potential. Together, we'll build a future unlike anything you've ever imagined." As he spoke, Emily felt something inside her shift. She had just made the most important decision of her life, and she couldn't help but wonder what the future would hold. Whatever it was a future that was finally hers to shape. And for the first time, she felt truly seen. As Emily stood there, the weight of her decision slowly began to sink in. She had agreed to Alexander's offer, but the reality of what that meant was still something she hadn't fully processed. The Alpha King had promised her a life of protection and purpose, but the life she had known was so far removed from what he was offering. Could she really change so drastically? Could she truly live a life she never dreamed possible? Alexander, as though sensing her inner turmoil, gave her a moment of silence before speaking again. "Come with me," he said gently. "I'll show you the first step in your new life." His voice was reassuring, and despite the uncertainties swirling in her mind, Emily followed him. As they left the temple and stepped into the cool evening air, Emily's senses were overwhelmed by the beauty and grandeur of the surroundings. The sprawling mansion ahead looked nothing like the modest home she had grown up in. The air felt different here, filled with promises of something more wealth, more power, more freedom. The door to the mansion swung open as Alexander led her inside. The interior was just as magnificent as the exterior, with high ceilings and ornate chandeliers casting a soft glow over the marble floors. The place felt alive with luxury, but there was an air of loneliness that lingered in the corners. As they moved deeper into the house, Alexander led her to a grand sitting room where a fire crackled in the hearth. He gestured for her to sit, and she did so, feeling out of place in this opulent setting. "This is your new home, Emily," Alexander said as he took a seat across from her, his gaze never leaving hers. "You will never have to worry about being invisible again. You'll have everything you need, and I will make sure you're protected." Emily nodded slowly, absorbing his words. The idea of no longer being an outsider, of finally belonging, was a strange but comforting thought. But the more she sat there, the more questions seemed to arise. "But what about my family?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I can't leave them behind. What happens to them?" Alexander's expression softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "I will provide for them as well," he said. "No one will suffer because of your decision. I will ensure that they are cared for, and they will always be welcome here." The reassurance in his voice helped calm her nerves, but there was still a lingering sense of disbelief. How had she gone from a quiet, unnoticed Omega to the future of an Alpha King's world? "And what do you want?" "From me, exactly?" Emily asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Alexander smiled, a genuine warmth in his eyes. "I want you to trust me, Emily," he said simply. "I want you to accept what I see in you. I see a woman who is capable of more than she realizes, and I will help you find that strength." Emily wasn't sure what to make of his words. She had always believed that her weakness defined her, that her lack of scent and ability to stand out was a flaw. But Alexander's belief in her, his unwavering faith, made her question everything she had ever known. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Emily whispered, more to herself than to him. Alexander's gaze softened even more, and he stood to walk over to where she sat. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, his touch reassuring yet firm. "No one is ever truly ready, Emily. But sometimes, we don't have the luxury of waiting until we are. The world has chosen you, and you've already made your choice. Now, we move forward together." Emily looked up at him, feeling the weight of his words settle in her chest. It was true. She had made a choice, and there was no going back. As much as she feared the unknown, she couldn't deny the spark of hope that had ignited within her. Maybe this was her chance to finally step into the life she had always dreamed of, a life where she was seen, respected, and loved. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I trust you." Alexander smiled, a look of approval crossing his features. "Good," he replied. "This is just the beginning, Emily. Together, we will make sure you become everything you were always meant to be." With those words, the future she had once thought impossible now seemed within her grasp. The path ahead was still unclear, but for the first time in her life, Emily felt like she had a place where she truly belonged. Emily spent the next few days trying to adjust to her new life, but the shift was not easy. The mansion, with its grand halls and endless rooms, felt both foreign and overwhelming. She wandered the corridors, exploring the opulent space, trying to make sense of her place within it. Alexander had given her everything she could ever want: comfort, luxury, safety, but there was still a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. She had always been someone who blended into the background, and now, with everything she had been offered, she didn't know how to stand out. She wasn't used to being seen, used to being important. At dinner one evening, Alexander sat across from her, watching her with a quiet intensity. "You're still adjusting, aren't you?" he asked, his voice calm and understanding. Emily nodded, pushing her food around her plate. "It's a lot to take in," she admitted. "I've never had all this before. I don't even know where to start." Alexander's eyes softened, and he leaned forward slightly. "You don't need to do anything right now. Take your time. You've spent your whole life being overlooked, Emily. Now, you get to decide who you want to be. There's no rush." His words were like a balm to her soul. For the first time in her life, she felt like she had options, like she was more than just an Omega without a place. As the days went on, Emily began to explore her new role within Alexander's world. She spent time with the staff, learning the intricacies of the mansion and the responsibilities that came with her new status. She found herself more at ease with the people who worked for Alexander, who treated her with respect and kindness. She had always been used to doing everything on her own, but now, there were people who wanted to help her, who cared about her well-being. One afternoon, as she walked through the gardens, Alexander found her again, this time without his usual air of command. He was simply a man, standing before her with a look of quiet admiration. "You look more comfortable," he said, his tone lighter than usual. "I can see that you're beginning to find your place here." Emily smiled faintly. "It's strange," she said, "but in a good way. For the first time, I'm not just surviving. I'm actually starting to live." Alexander's expression softened, and he stepped closer to her. "I'm glad to hear that, Emily," he said. "You deserve to be happy, to feel fulfilled." Emily looked up at him, her heart stirring with something she couldn't quite name. The connection between them had always been there, a quiet undercurrent that neither of them had spoken of. But now, as she stood here with him, she realized that it wasn't just the luxury and protection that had drawn her in. It was him. It was the way he saw her, the way he made her feel like she was more than just an Omega. "Thank you," she whispered, not just for the mansion, not just for the protection, but for believing in her when no one else had. Alexander's eyes softened even further, and he reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "I've always known you had more inside of you. You just needed someone to see it." The words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent her entire life being invisible, dismissed by everyone around her. And now, here was this man, this powerful alpha king, who saw her, who believed in her. For the first time, she didn't feel like an invisible shadow. She felt like she mattered. And that feeling, that small but powerful shift in her heart, was enough to make her believe that maybe, just maybe, she had made the right choice after all. As the weeks passed, Emily began to settle into her new life more and more. The mansion, once so intimidating, started to feel like home. She found herself in the company of Alexander more often, as he included her in discussions about the future of his kingdom and their partnership. It was an odd, yet comforting feeling, being included, being seen as an equal. But with each passing day, Emily couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. Was this truly the life she had dreamed of? Or was she simply being swept into a world that was far beyond her reach? Despite her growing bond with Alexander, there were still moments when she felt like a stranger in his world. She wasn't used to having power or influence, and she certainly wasn't used to the attention that came with being by his side. The way the staff looked at her now, with respect and deference, was still a bit overwhelming. She had never experienced this kind of treatment before. One evening, after a long day of meetings with his advisors, Alexander invited Emily to walk with him in the garden. The air was cool and crisp, and the moon hung high in the sky, casting a soft glow on everything around them. The garden was beautiful, well-kept hedges, vibrant flowers, and a small fountain in the center. It was peaceful, serene. "How are you adjusting?" Alexander asked, breaking the silence. Emily glanced at him, her heart skipping a beat. His presence was always so commanding, but in moments like these, when it was just the two of them, he felt more like a person than the ruler of an entire kingdom. "I'm getting there," she said quietly. "It's just a lot to take in. I've never had anything like this before." Alexander nodded, his expression softening. "You're doing well. I know this isn't easy, but I believe in you. You're capable of more than you realize, Emily." His words filled her with warmth, but also a sense of uncertainty. She wasn't used to hearing such praise. Back home, she had always been the one who helped others, never the one who was seen as important. But here, with Alexander, she was something different, something more. As they continued their walk, Alexander stopped by the fountain and turned to face her. "You know, Emily," he began, his voice low and thoughtful, "I've spent most of my life surrounded by power and ambition. But since meeting you, something has changed." Emily looked up at him, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" she asked. Alexander's eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was an intensity in his gaze that took her breath away. "Before I met you, I never believed in fate," he said. "I never believed in a destined connection, in someone who could change everything for me. But then you came into my life, and I realized something. You were always meant to be here, with me." His words were unexpected, and for a moment, Emily was at a loss for words. She had never thought of herself as someone who could change anyone's life, let alone an Alpha King's. "I don't know what to say," she whispered, her heart racing. You don't need to say anything, Alexander replied, his voice soft and reassuring. Just know that whatever happens next, you're not alone. I'm here, and I will always be by your side. Emily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had never felt so seen, so valued. For the first time in her life, she felt like she truly mattered. As the night wore on, they continued to walk in silence, each lost in their thoughts. But there was an unspoken understanding between them. Emily knew that her life had changed forever, and she couldn't help but wonder what the future would bring. Whatever it was, she was no longer just an Omega, invisible and forgotten. She was someone who mattered. And that thought was both terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. As the days continued to pass, Emily found herself becoming more comfortable in her new life with Alexander. The mansion had begun to feel like home, the grandeur no longer intimidating, but something she could grow into. It wasn't just the luxurious surroundings that changed, it was the way Alexander had made her feel. She was no longer just an overlooked Omega, but someone with value, someone who could make a difference. Yet, as much as she adjusted to her new life, a small, quiet part of her remained uncertain. She had accepted Alexander's offer, but what did it truly mean for her? What was expected of her in this partnership? It was one thing to live in his world of wealth and power, but what would be required of her in return? One afternoon, while Emily was in the garden, taking a break from the constant bustle of the mansion, Alexander found her again. The air was warm, the sun casting a golden glow over the flowers, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt at peace. She had always loved nature, the simplicity of it, the way everything had its place, yet was free to grow at its own pace. You seem more at ease today, Alexander remarked as he approached her. Emily looked up at him and offered a small smile. I guess I'm getting used to it, she said. I'm not used to so much space or attention, but I'm getting there. He nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. I know it's a lot, but you've made it through the hardest part, accepting the change. Now, we just take it one step at a time. Emily felt a warmth in his words, something more than just reassurance. It was as if he genuinely cared for her well-being, and for the first time in a long while, Emily didn't feel like she had to keep everything inside. I know you're wondering what comes next, Alexander continued, sitting beside her. You're not just here to live in luxury. You're here because I believe in you, Emily. I see something in you that no one else has, and I want you to be a part of this, not just as my partner, but as someone who shapes the future with me. Emily turned to him, surprised by the depth of his words. She had thought of herself as just a companion, a figure to stand beside him, but now she understood that he wanted more for her. What do you mean by shaping the future? She asked, her curiosity piqued. Alexander's gaze grew even more serious. I didn't get to where I am by being passive. I've spent years building a kingdom, Emily, but I can't do it alone. I need someone by my side who understands not just the power of leadership, but the power of compassion, of connection. That's where you come in. Emily felt her heart skip a beat. He was asking her to be more than just a wife or a partner. He was asking her to be part of something greater. She wasn't sure if she was ready for that responsibility, but she knew she couldn't turn away from it either. She had been given an opportunity to be someone more than she had ever imagined, to build something lasting and meaningful. I don't know if I can live up to that, she said quietly, her insecurities creeping in. I've never been anyone important. Alexander reached out, gently lifting her chin so that she could meet his eyes. Emily, you already are important. You've always been. You just needed to see it for yourself. His words hit her harder than she expected, and for a moment, she felt like the weight of everything she had been hiding inside had been lifted. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Alexander truly believed in her. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. What if she failed? What if she couldn't live up to the role he was offering her? You don't need to have all the answers right now, he said softly, as though reading her thoughts. We'll do this together, step by step. And as long as you're with me, I'll be there every step of the way. Emily swallowed hard, the weight of his promise settling over her. She had no idea what the future would hold, but for the first time, she was no longer afraid of what came next. She was ready to embrace whatever challenge lay ahead, with Alexander by her side. Okay, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Let's do this. Alexander smiled, his expression full of pride. Together, he agreed. And as they sat there in the quiet of the garden, the sun setting behind them, Emily realized that for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she was meant to be. The days turned into weeks, and Emily found herself more and more comfortable in her new role beside Alexander. What had once been a world of uncertainty and fear had slowly begun to feel like a place she could belong. As she learned the intricacies of the kingdom's operations, Alexander continued to guide her, teaching her how to navigate not only the political landscape, but also how to use her own intuition and compassion as a source of strength. She was beginning to see herself in a new light, no longer just the quiet Omega from a small village, but someone capable of making a real impact. One evening, after a long day filled with meetings and discussions, Emily found herself alone in the library. She had been reflecting on everything that had changed since she arrived. The mansion, the power, the responsibilities, everything felt overwhelming at times. But what overwhelmed her the most was how much she had changed. She wasn't the same woman who had walked into the mansion all those weeks ago, uncertain and afraid. A soft knock on the door broke her thoughts. She looked up to see Alexander standing in the doorway, a small, knowing smile on his face. "I thought I might find you here," he said as he stepped inside. "A quiet moment to reflect?" Emily smiled back, nodding. "It's been a lot to take in, and I guess I needed some time to process everything." Alexander walked over to the table, where she had been reading a book, and sat down beside her. "You've handled everything better than I could have imagined," he said, his voice full of admiration. "I've seen you grow in ways I never expected. You're not just my partner in name, Emily. You're becoming my equal in every way." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had never thought of herself as an equal to Alexander. He was the Alpha King, the most powerful man in the kingdom, and she had always been just an Omega. But as she looked into his eyes, she realized that he saw her differently than anyone else ever had. He saw her potential, her strength, and that made her believe in herself in ways she never thought possible. "Thank you," she whispered, the weight of his words sinking in. "I've never felt like this before. I've always been afraid of stepping into something bigger than myself. But with you, it feels like I have a place." Alexander smiled, his expression softening as he reached out and gently touched her hand. "You've always had a place, Emily. I saw that from the beginning. It was just a matter of you realizing it." Emily looked down at their joined hands, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never had someone believe in her like this, someone who truly saw her. And in return, she realized she wanted nothing more than to stand by his side, to help him build a future together. As the night wore on, they spoke more about their plans for the kingdom and how they could work together to create something lasting. But as they shared their hopes and dreams, Emily realized that her own dreams had changed. No longer was she simply surviving, simply getting by. She was now part of something bigger, something that had the potential to change everything. When Alexander stood to leave, he paused by the door and turned back to her. "You've become everything I hoped for, Emily. I'm proud of you, and I know we're just getting started." Emily's heart fluttered at his words, and for the first time, she truly believed them. She wasn't just by his side. She was a part of something that would shape the future. And as she watched him leave the room, she knew that whatever the future held, she was ready to face it, not as someone afraid to step up, but as someone who was finally ready to embrace the life she had always been meant to live. The days began to blend together as Emily's life continued to evolve in ways she had never anticipated. She had grown more accustomed to the rhythms of the mansion, the responsibilities she had been given, and the powerful presence of Alexander. Though the transition had been difficult, she now saw herself as an integral part of his world. Every day, she learned more about her role in the kingdom, but also about herself. Her growing connection with Alexander had become a source of strength, and together, they began to make strides toward the future they had discussed. It wasn't just about power or prestige. It was about building something that would last, something rooted in trust, respect, and mutual understanding. One evening, as they walked through the gardens again, Emily couldn't help but feel the weight of all that had happened. The garden, once a place of quiet reflection, now felt like the backdrop of a new life, her life. Alexander's presence beside her was comforting, but also, in some strange way, grounding. He had become her anchor, and she was beginning to realize just how much she needed him. "How are you feeling?" Alexander's voice broke through her thoughts. She glanced up at him, meeting his gaze. There was something in his eyes, a deep understanding that made her feel like he could see through all her walls. "I'm starting to feel like I'm not just here by chance," Emily said softly, her voice tinged with a mixture of awe and vulnerability. "Like I'm actually meant to be here. But sometimes, I still wonder if I'm enough." Alexander stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious but gentle. He reached out, cupping her face with his hand in a way that felt both intimate and reassuring. "Emily," he said, his voice low and steady, "you are more than enough. I've always known that you had the potential to be great. But what you don't see is that you don't have to be perfect to be everything I need. You're already everything I could have ever hoped for." His words hit her in a way she hadn't expected. She had always questioned her worth, had always felt like she was just getting by, just trying to make herself fit into a world that didn't see her. But now, standing here with Alexander, she felt something she had never felt before: acceptance. He didn't want her to be anyone other than herself. "Thank you," Emily whispered, her heart swelling with emotion. Alexander smiled, his thumb gently brushing across her cheek. "You don't need to thank me. I'm just telling you the truth." They stood there in silence for a moment, the soft rustle of the leaves in the wind filling the space between them. For the first time, Emily felt like she truly belonged, like she had found her place in a world she had once thought was beyond her reach. She had always feared that the life she had chosen would come with conditions, with expectations that she couldn't meet. But now, with Alexander by her side, she realized that she didn't need to change who she was to fit in. She was already enough. As they continued their walk, Emily's heart felt lighter, her steps more sure. She no longer felt like she was just surviving in this world, she was living it. With Alexander, she was no longer an outsider. She was part of something bigger, something that had the potential to change everything. And as they walked together, side by side, Emily knew that whatever came next, she was ready to face it, not with fear, but with the strength that had always been inside her, waiting to be recognized. As the seasons shifted, so did Emily. She had grown into her role beside Alexander in ways she hadn't imagined possible. The grand halls of the mansion, once a place of isolation, now felt like home. The responsibilities she carried no longer felt like burdens, but opportunities to make a real difference. The bond between her and Alexander deepened every day, and together they faced the challenges of leadership with unwavering unity. Yet, despite the progress they had made, Emily often found herself reflecting on her own transformation. She was no longer the quiet Omega who once hid in the shadows, afraid of being overlooked. She was a force in her own right, someone who commanded attention not by force, but by strength of character. But just as she began to feel at peace with herself, a wave of doubt crept in. There were still so many unknowns about her future, about the kingdom, and about the role she was meant to play in it. One evening, as the sun set over the sprawling gardens, Emily found herself standing on the balcony, looking out over the horizon. The air was crisp, and the soft whisper of the wind through the trees was comforting. But her thoughts were heavy. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Alexander approaching, his presence calming as always. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice gentle yet perceptive. Emily smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Just thinking," she replied, her voice distant. "There's so much to think about." Alexander stepped closer, his gaze never leaving her. "I know the feeling," he said, his tone softening. "The future can be a daunting thing to face, especially when it's filled with unknowns. But you don't have to carry that weight alone. I'm with you, Emily. Always." She turned to face him fully, meeting his steady gaze. In the stillness of the moment, she realized just how much those words meant to her. "I know," she said quietly, "but sometimes I wonder if I'm truly ready for everything that's expected of me." Alexander reached out and gently cupped her face, his touch warm and reassuring. "You don't have to be ready for everything, Emily. You don't have to have all the answers right now. What matters is that you're here, and you're giving it your all. That's all I ever wanted from you." His words were simple, yet they carried so much weight. Emily's heart swelled with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "But what if I fail?" she asked, the fear in her voice barely masked. "What if I can't live up to the expectations?" Alexander's expression softened, and he took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "Failure is not something to fear," he said, his voice low and sincere. It's a part of life, Emily. It's how we grow, how we learn. You've already come so far, and you're more than capable of handling whatever comes your way. You have the strength within you. All you have to do is trust yourself. Emily felt the weight of his words settle in her heart. She had spent so long doubting her own worth, questioning whether she was enough. But here, with Alexander, she was starting to see herself through his eyes. For the first time, she believed in her own strength. She believed that she could make a difference. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "for believing in me." Alexander smiled, his eyes filled with pride and affection. "I've always believed in you, Emily, and I always will." As they stood there, side by side, Emily felt a quiet sense of peace wash over her. She had a long road ahead, filled with challenges and uncertainties, but with Alexander by her side, she knew that she was no longer alone. She was ready to face whatever came next, to embrace the future that awaited her, and to build a legacy that would stand the test of time. Together, they would make it happen.